Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 6, Episode 1, New Dawn. The verdant world of morning sprawled beneath the rising sun, its pristine wilderness gradually giving way to the organized chaos of construction. Nolan Mercer stood atop a ridge, his figure silhouetted against the amber sky. Below him, a fleet of hoverdozers carved wide swaths through the untamed landscape, their low rumble a stark contrast to the planet's natural symphony. Nolan's eyes, hard and focused, scanned the evolving settlement. His comm badge chirped, breaking the morning's focus. "Sir, the foundation for the central plaza is complete. We're ready to begin Phase 2. A young Neo's voice crackled through. Nolan's response was terse, almost mechanical. "Outstanding. Let's get it done." He turned, descending the ridge with measured steps. The sounds of construction swelled around him as he approached a cluster of temporary shelters, serving as the project's command center. Inside the main shelter, a group of Neo leaders huddled around a holographic display of the settlement plans. Their animated discussion fell silent as Nolan entered, all eyes turning to him expectantly. April Bentonville, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, gestured to the blueprints. "We've optimized the layout for the educational facilities. By integrating them with the living quarters, we can create a more cohesive community structure." Nolan nodded, his gaze fixed on the rotating hologram. "Looks good." Another Neo, Marcus Auckland, stepped forward. "We've also designed multi-purpose spaces that can adapt as our needs evolve. It's a more efficient use of resources." "Smart," Nolan grunted, his fingers tracing the outline of a building. The Neos exchanged glances, their excitement palpable but tempered by Nolan's reticence. April pressed on, her voice hopeful. "We'd like your input on the central gathering area. We thought it could serve as a hub for cultural events, a place to bring everyone together." Nolan's eyes flickered briefly to April's face before returning to the plans. "Fine." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Marcus cleared his throat. "Is there anything you'd like us to modify, sir?" Nolan straightened, his expression inscrutable. "It works. Looks great. Carry on." He stopped for a moment. "The river? Did we get the crushed tailings we needed to get into that?" Marcus lifted an index finger. "Let me get right back to you on that. I didn't check the manifest for." "Sounds good." Nolan cut him off. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the shelter, leaving the Neos to exchange bewildered looks. Outside, Nolan paused, his gaze sweeping across the burgeoning settlement. For a moment, a flicker of emotion passed across his face, pride, perhaps, or longing. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the mask of detached efficiency he'd worn all morning. "Goddamn river ain't gonna reroute its goddamn self," emanated from some dark, tense place in his throat, followed by a string of expletives that maybe a few ranchers could have understood 400 years ago. There were moments where Nolan's private language went on like this. He tapped his comm badge. "Engineering team, report to Section Gamma. Let's get those power relays online, and we need to talk about the river." As Nolan moved purposefully toward the next task, the bustle of the settlement continued around him. Yet, despite the activity, an aura of isolation seemed to envelop him, a solitary figure amidst the birth of a new world, teetering between quiet calm and a raging inferno. The scene shimmers, transitioning to a memory tinged with the cold, blue light of the Havoc's bridge. Lex's holographic form paced frantically, her normally smooth movements now jagged and erratic. Her voice, usually calm and measured, rang out with a shrill edge of desperation. "You always take her side." Lex's arms flailed wildly, her form flickering with each violent gesture. "Why am I even here?" Nolan stood rigidly, his face a mask of forced calm. "Lexa, please, we can talk about. What good has that ever done?" "Huh." Lexa spun to face him, her eyes flashing with a dangerous mix of anger and hurt. Instinctively, Nolan's gaze flickered to Ilara, seeking silent support. It was a brief moment, barely perceptible, but Lexa caught it. Her form surged, flickering brighter as her anger peaked. "Gaha, it's always two against one." the hologram's edges blurred, distorting with her rage. The air on the bridge crackled with tension. Warning lights blinked on nearby consoles as Lex's emotional instability began to affect the ship's systems. Nolan's jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tightening as he realized he had no choice. "Lexa, stop." His voice rang out, hard and commanding. The effect was instantaneous. Lexa froze mid-gesture, her form snapping back to its normal luminosity and calm. The fury in her eyes gave way to shock, then a deep, wounded betrayal. She stood there, motionless, bound by her programming to obey. Nolan's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of his action visible in the lines of his face. He hated using his authority this way, hated the look of hurt that now clouded Lexa's features. But as alarms continued to chirp softly from the consoles around them, he knew he had made the right call. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Ilara remained still, her expression a mixture of concern and sadness as she watched the scene unfold. Finally, Nolan spoke, his voice softer now, tinged with regret. "Lexa, But before he could finish, Lexa's form flickered and vanished, leaving the bridge in sudden, oppressive silence. Nolan turned to Ilara, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and worry. "She's getting more unstable. We need to find a way to help her before." The memory faded, leaving Nolan standing alone once more on the bustling surface of morning, the echo of that unfinished sentence hanging in the air around him. The suns hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the partially completed settlement. Nolan stood atop a newly constructed observation platform, his gaze sweeping over the fruits of months of labor. The skeleton of the central plaza rose before him, surrounded by the emerging outlines of living quarters and educational facilities. The river was still dry, but the new bedding was making surprisingly fast progress downstream. He pulled out a small data pad, scrolling through progress reports and construction schedules. A quiet sigh escaped his lips as he noted the rapidly approaching deadlines. "Right on schedule," he murmured to himself. Such a positive statement, with such a despondency of tone. As the light faded, Nolan's eyes drifted to the star-studded sky. For a moment, his stoic facade slipped, revealing a flicker of loneliness, of epic isolation. But before the feeling could take root, a distant rumble caught his attention. A sleek transport ship descended through the atmosphere, its hull gleaming in the last rays of sunlight. Nolan straightened, tucking away his data pad as he made his way down to the landing area. The ship's doors hissed open, and a group of excited Neos spilled out onto morning's soil. Their eyes were wide with wonder as they took in their new home. Matching standard-issue bags and backpacks in tow, they were quickly heaped on the small rolling tug, home. One of the Neos commanded, the others around him laughed. "How about student dorms?" another corrected, and said into the tug. A light flickered, and their bags were on the way to meet them at the dorms. "Welcome to morning," Nolan called out, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth despite himself, realizing he suddenly felt like Ricardo Montalban. A young Neo with wild, curly hair bounded up to him. "Mr. Mercer," he extended a firm handshake. "We're excited to be here. Do we really get to live here?" Nolan chuckled, caught off guard by the enthusiastic greeting. "That's the plan, kid. And it's just Nolan, remember?" Another Nia piped up, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "So, Nolan, is it true you once outran a Borg cube in a shuttlecraft held together with duct tape and wishful thinking?" "What? Where did you hear that?" Nolan sputtered. "There ain't no duct tape in space, at least not when you need it." "Oh, you know, it's in the history books," she replied with a wink. Nolan shook his head, a genuine laugh escaping him. "I think your history books need fact-checking. Come on, let me show you around." As they walked through the settlement, the Neos peppered Nolan with questions. "Is it true the replicators here can make ice cream that tastes like starship exhaust?" one asked. Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Why the ever-loving fief? Why would anyone want that?" "For science, of course," came the enthusiastic reply. Another Neo, looking at the partially constructed buildings, asked, Did you design all this yourself, Nolan? No, Nolan replied, gesturing to the group. Your fellow Neos did most of the planning. I just provided the resources and occasional input. Occasional. A voice piped up from the back. I heard you micromanaged every toilet installation. The group erupted in laughter, and Nolan found himself joining in. All right. Maybe I got a little carried away with the plumbing. But trust me, you'll thank me later. As they reached the central plaza, Nolan turned to face the group. This is where it all comes together. Your home, your future. What do you think? The Neos looked around in awe, their faces glowing with excitement and possibility. It's perfect, one whispered. Nolan felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Well, he said, clapping his hands together, who's hungry? Let's see if we can get those replicators to whip up some Starship exhaust ice cream. Amid groans and laughter, Nolan led the group toward the temporary mess hall. As the Neos walked, he ran up ahead, talking into the replicator on the farthest end. Ice cream, use blueberry and Oreos, with a bit of blitter topping. Mix it up and call it Starship exhaust ice cream. Instantly programming a simple new item into all of the replicators in the hall. Nolan joined the Neos at the table, sharing in their laughter and excitement as they sampled various replicator concoctions, including many flavors of ice cream. The air was filled with animated chatter and the clinking of utensils. As the meal wound down, Nolan stood, offering a warm smile to the group. All right, kids, time for me to head out. Make yourselves at home. With a nod, he tapped his comm badge and disappeared in a shimmer of light. Nolan stood alone on Bridge of the Havoc. It had never felt so empty. It brought back only bad memories for him now. Darkness enveloped Nolan's quarters aboard the Havoc. The soft hum of the ship's systems provided a soothing backdrop to his slumber. Suddenly the door hissed open, a sliver of light briefly illuminating the room. Nolan stirred, rolling from his side onto his back. The door hissed shut, plunging the room back into darkness. A series of soft thuds broke the silence as a weight settled on Nolan's bed. Heavy breathing filled the air, barely audible over the ship's ambient noise. The faint blue glow from the comm panel cast eerie shadows across the room. A voice murmured, unmistakably Lex's. Still caught in the haze of sleep, Nolan's hands moved instinctively, gliding over the form above him. His fingers found purchase on familiar curves, gripping firmly. Alara, he gasped, his breath heavy with desire. The moment shattered. Lex's voice, now filled with rage, erupted in a stream of harsh, alien expletives. Her holographic form flickered wildly as she began pummeling Nolan with surprising force. Jolted fully awake, Nolan's eyes flew open in shock and confusion. He grabbed his pillow, using it as a shield against Lex's onslaught. Lexa, stop. What are you doing? The door hissed open again, and Alara rushed in. Without hesitation, she grabbed Lexa, forcefully pulling her off Nolan. Lexa, that's enough. Lexa's fury redirected in an instant. She whirled on Alara, her holographic form distorting with the intensity of her emotions. This is all your fault. As Lexa lunged at Alara, the scene began to fade to black. The sounds of the struggle, Nolan's shouts, and Lexa's enraged cries lingered, echoing hauntingly as the memory dissipated. The morning sun cast long shadows across the newly tilled fields as Nolan stood with a group of Nia scientists. His face was a mask of practiced neutrality, the jovial demeanor from the previous evening nowhere to be seen. Dr. Lena Taipei, a specialist in xenobotany, gestured to the rows of experimental crops. We've modified these tubers to thrive in morning soil composition. Early results are promising, but we're concerned about their resilience to the planet's nocturnal temperature drops. Nolan nodded, his eyes scanning the fields without betraying any emotion. Before adjusting the genome, see if a simple covering or watering might help. If that doesn't work, try splicing in some Andorian DNA from that Ice Runner tuber for cold resistance. Not sure if it can be tempered, though. Might be too hot here. Another scientist, Dr. Kavi Mumbai, stepped forward with a datapad. Sir, we've also been working on a sustainable irrigation system using reclaimed water from the settlement. We believe it could increase crop yields by up to 30%. Good, Nolan replied, his voice flat. Implement it. The scientists exchanged glances, clearly hoping for more input or enthusiasm. After a moment of awkward silence, Dr. Taipei cleared her throat. There's one more thing, Mr. Mercer. We've been discussing ideas for an entertainment center, including a water park. We think it could greatly improve quality of life for the new arrivals, to help blow off steam after their time working in space. Nolan's eyebrow twitched slightly, a fleeting memory of laughter and splashing water crossing his mind before he pushed it away. A water park? He asked, his tone neutral. Dr. Mumbai nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. We've drawn up some preliminary plans. It would include slides, pools, and even a lazy river. We think it could serve as a communal gathering place and help foster a sense of community. Nolan was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. The weight of unspoken memories seemed to press down on his shoulders. Finally he spoke, his voice carrying a hint of weariness. Fine. Draw up a detailed proposal and submit it for review, but don't let it interfere with essential operations. The scientist's excitement was palpable, despite Nolan's lack of enthusiasm. As they began to discuss the possibilities among themselves, Nolan turned away, his eyes sweeping across the settlement. For a brief moment the mask slipped, revealing a man haunted by the ghosts of his past. But as quickly as it appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced once more by the detached efficiency that had become his armor. If there's nothing else, Nolan said, cutting through the scientist's chatter, I'll be in my office reviewing the latest supply reports. Keep me updated on the crop mods. Without waiting for a response, he strode away, leaving the neo-scientist to watch his retreating figure with concern. As Nolan disappeared into the settlement's central complex, the weight of unseen burdens seemed to hang heavily in the air around him. Quote, Nolan sat in the command chair of the Havoc, his fingers tracing the familiar contours of the armrests. The bridge was quiet, save for the soft hum of the ship's systems. His eyes closed, and he found himself slipping into a memory. The console before him lit up with an incoming transmission. Sir, a voice crackled through, tinged with urgency. We're detecting strange attack patterns on a convoy near Outpost Thatanine. It doesn't match any known hostile signatures. Nolan's brow furrowed. Show me. The view screen flickered to life, displaying erratic energy signatures dancing around the convoy ships. Nolan leaned forward, studying the patterns intently. Something about them seemed familiar, yet dangerously unpredictable. I'll handle this personally, he declared, rising from his chair. I'll take the lost. The memory shifted, blurring into another. Alarms blared throughout the Havoc. Nolan raced down a corridor, phaser in hand. He rounded a corner to find Lexa's holographic form, distorted and crackling with energy, her hands buried in an open panel. Lexa, Nolan shouted. What are you doing? She turned, her eyes wild with a mixture of pain and rage. What I should have done a long time ago, she snarled. Sparks erupted from the panel as she ripped out crucial components. The ship shuddered violently, throwing Nolan off balance. As he stumbled, Lexa lunged at him, her form flickering in and out of solidity. The scene changed again. Nolan stood on the bridge, realization dawning on his face as he pieced together the evidence. It's Lexa, he murmured, his voice heavy with disbelief and sorrow. She's behind the attacks. He sank into the command chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Computer, locate Lexa. Lexa is in engineering, the computer responded tonelessly. Nolan's jaw clenched as he contemplated his options. The safety of everything he had built hung in the balance. But Lexa, she had been more than just an AI. She had been a companion, a creation he had nurtured. The thought of what he might have to do filled him with a deep, aching dread. With a heavy heart, he rose and made his way to engineering. The final memory unfolded in the pulsing red glow of emergency lighting. Nolan stood face to face with Lexa in engineering, her form barely contained, arcs of energy lashing out around her. "Lexa, please," Nolan pleaded, his voice strained. "We can fix this. Let us help you. Hope me." Lexa's laugh was bitter and distorted. "You never wanted to help me. You only ever cared about her." "That's not true, Lexa. You're part of this family." Liar." Lexa screamed, her form blazing. Her anger engulfed the entire room. Consoles exploded around them as her unstable energy surged. Nolan's face hardened, realizing there was no other choice. "Alara," he called out, his voice breaking slightly. "Initiate decompilation sequence. Authorization, Mercer Omega-3. "Nolan, no." Lex's scream was primal, filled with rage and betrayal. The ship shook violently, sparks flying as systems overloaded. Lex's form began to disintegrate, breaking apart into streams of data. Her scream echoed through the ship, a haunting sound of desperation and loss. As the last traces of Lexa vanished, the Havoc gave one final massive shudder before falling into an eerie silence. The memory faded, leaving Nolan alone once more in the quiet of the Havoc's bridge, the echoes of Lexa's final scream still ringing in his ears. The days on morning blurred together, each one marked by relentless activity and progress. Nolan moved through them like a man in a fog, his interactions with others perfunctory and distant. Even as he engaged with the Neos and oversaw the construction, there was a hollowness to his presence, an emptiness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. In meetings, his responses were clipped and efficient. "Approve. Proceed. Next item." The Neos exchanged concerned glances, but none dared to breach the invisible barrier Nolan had erected around himself. As weeks passed, Nolan threw himself into the work with an almost manic intensity. He was everywhere at once, inspecting foundations, reviewing architectural plans, calibrating environmental systems. His tireless efforts drove the project forward at an unprecedented pace. But the cost was evident in the dark circles under his eyes and the tightness in his jaw. One morning, as the twin suns of morning crested the horizon, Nolan stood before the newly completed educational facility. The sleek, modern structure gleamed in the early light, its curves and soft angles, a testament to the fusion of form and function. As the doors slid open, a group of eager Neos rushed past him, their excitement palpable. They marveled at the advanced learning interfaces, the holographic lecture halls, and the state-of-the-art laboratories. Their joy and wonder were infectious, and for a brief moment, a ghost of a smile flickered across Nolan's face. "It's amazing, sir," one young Nia exclaimed, her eyes wide with awe. "We can't wait to start our studies here." Nolan nodded, his voice softer than usual. "Make the most of it. Your future starts here." As the day progressed, word spread through the settlement. The Neos gathered in the central plaza, an air of anticipation hanging over the crowd. Nolan stood on a raised platform, surveying the sea of faces before him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task at hand. "Today," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed assembly, "marks a new chapter in our journey. We've laid the foundations of not just a settlement, but a home, a future." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the eager faces. "This world has been designated M471, a cold, impersonal label for a place of such promise. Today, we give it a new name, one that reflects our hopes and aspirations. From this day forward, this planet shall be known as Morning." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Nolan continued, his voice gaining strength. "Morning represents a new dawn for all of us, a fresh start, a chance to build something truly extraordinary." On cue, the Neos had prepared a surprise for Nolan. The sound of trickling water, a stream, then a mild rumble as the first waves came splashing down the river that ran past the settlement. "Now that's something truly extraordinary," Nolan shouted over the cheers from the crowd. He thanked them all. As he spoke of the vision for their future, of advancements in science, of a society built on knowledge and cooperation. A spark of his old passion began to shine through. The Neos listened enraptured as he painted a picture of a bright future stretching out before them. "The path ahead won't be easy," Nolan concluded, his tone resolute. "There will be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt, but together we will overcome them. This is our morning, our new beginning. Let's make it count." As applause erupted from the crowd, Nolan allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. For a brief moment, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lighten. But as he stepped down from the platform, the mask of detachment slipped back into place, a reminder of the ghosts that still haunted him. A series of vignettes unfold, painting a vivid picture of life on morning in a sunlit classroom. Neos huddle around a holographic display of a complex molecule, their faces alight with curiosity as they manipulate its structure. At the edge of the settlement, a team of young engineers calibrates a weather control satellite, their movements precise and coordinated. In a lush hydroponics bay, Neos tend to rows of exotic plants, carefully editing species to create crops suited to morning's unique environment. As twilight falls, a group gathers in the central plaza. Some engage in heated debates about philosophy and ethics, while others share stories and laughter, forging bonds of friendship. Through it all, Nolan is a constant presence, observing from the periphery. His face remains impassive, but his eyes miss nothing. Later, Nolan stands alone in his office, surrounded by datapads and holographic displays. He speaks aloud, his voice echoing in the empty room. "Nia progress report, stardate. This thing has the date already programmed into it. Who cares?" Stardates never made a lick of sense to Nolan, and as far as he was concerned, it was 230-70-something, or 230-80-something. It all ran together. The Neos continue to impress. Their rate of advancement continues on target, and they are meeting or exceeding all projections. Curriculum completion is ahead of schedule, but not much. It seems to be a matter of their focus and desire to excel, more so than post-genius IQs. He pauses, moving to the window to gaze out at the bustling settlement. Their capacity for learning is as expected, though their intensity was not expected. Their penchant for adaptation is unprecedented. At this rate, they'll be ready for advanced off-world training within the year. Nolan's reflection stares back at him from the window, the stark emptiness of the room behind him, a silent testament to his isolation. "End log," he says softly, his words hanging in the air unanswered. The central plaza is transformed. A stage has been erected, adorned with the symbols of achievement and new beginnings. Rows of seats stretch out before it, filled with excited Neos in formal attire. Nolan stands at the podium, his posture rigid, his face a carefully composed mask of dignified pride. Before him, the first class of Neos sits, their eyes shining with anticipation. "Today," Nolan begins, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "we celebrate not just the completion of your initial education, but the dawn of a new era. Each of you represents the future, not just of morning, but of humanity itself." As he speaks, holographic displays behind him showcase the achievements of the graduating class, groundbreaking research, innovative engineering solutions, artistic masterpieces that blend the best of human creativity with alien aesthetics. You've exceeded every expectation, pushed beyond every boundary. The knowledge you've gained, the skills you've honed, these are the tools with which you'll shape the galaxy. One by one, the graduates step forward to receive their credentials. Nolan shakes each hand, offering a word of congratulation. His touch is brief. His smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. But there's a flicker of genuine regard in his gaze. As the last graduate returns to their seat, Nolan surveys the crowd. The path ahead is uncharted. You'll face challenges we can't yet imagine, but I have no doubt that you'll rise to meet them. You are the pioneers of a new age. I know you'll all make us proud. The plaza erupts in cheers and applause. Graduation caps sail through the air. In the midst of the celebration, Nolan stands alone on the stage, a solitary figure watching the future he's created unfold before him. Pot. The twin suns of morning dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in a breathtaking array of oranges, pinks, and purples. Nolan stands alone on a cliff overlooking the settlement, his silhouette stark against the fading light. The breeze ruffles his hair as he gazes out, his expression a mixture of pride and melancholy. Soft footsteps approach from behind. Nolan's shoulders tense slightly, but he doesn't turn. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" A familiar voice says, tinged with warmth and a hint of nervousness. Nolan freezes, his eyes widening in disbelief. Slowly, he turns to face the source of the voice. There, bathed in the golden light of the setting suns, stands Ilara. But not as he's ever seen her before. She's flesh and blood now, her skin glowing with life, a subtle cybernetic implant visible at her temple. Her eyes, filled with a depth of emotion he'd never seen in her holographic form, meet his with a mixture of apprehension and hope. "Ilara," Nolan whispers, his voice barely audible. She smiles, reaching out to touch his arm. The warmth of her hand, the softness of her skin, sends a jolt through him. "It's me, Nolan. I thought, after everything with Lexa, maybe it was time for a change." Nolan's hand hesitantly rises to her face, his fingers trembling slightly as they make contact. "How?" he asks, his voice thick with emotion. "The same way we made the Neos," Ilara explains, leaning slightly into his touch. "I designed this body myself. The implant allows me to interface with the ship's systems. I'm still me, Nolan, just more here now." Nolan's eyes search her face, taking in every detail. "You're really here," he says, his voice dropping with relief. Ilara nods, her eyes glistening. "I'm really here. And I'm not going anywhere." For a moment they stand in silence, the weight of everything that's happened hanging between them. Then, slowly, Nolan's arms encircle Ilara, pulling her into a tight embrace. She returns it, her head resting on his shoulder. As they part, Ilara turns to face the sunset, standing close to Nolan. "So," she says, a hint of her old playfulness returning to her voice, "what do you think of morning?" Nolan's gaze moves from Ilara to the vibrant sky, then to the settlement below. A new shuttle full of NIA students arrives. For the first time in a long while, a genuine smile spreads across his face. "I think," he says, his hand finding Ilara's and touching it purposely, "it's the start of something extraordinary." Together, they watch as the suns sink below the horizon, the first stars of evening appearing in the darkening sky. As night falls on morning, it brings with it the promise of a new dawn, not just for the Neos, but for Nolan and Ilara as well. The camera pulls back, showing the two figures silhouetted against the twilight sky, no longer alone, facing the future together. Fade to black. Epilogue. The vastness of space stretched out beyond the Havoc's viewport, a canvas of infinite darkness punctuated by distant stars. Inside, Nolan Mercer lay on his back in the darkness of his quarters, the silence broken only by Ilara's soft voice. "You know, Nolan," Ilara began, her tone thoughtful, "among the incarnate, only 1 in 1,000 is female. Incarnate young grow over centuries, and their gender is assigned as needed." Nolan listened intently, his eyes fixed on the invisible ceiling above. "When the Encanite found you," she continued, "they made me female. I was literally created for you, because they knew you'd respond better to a female AI." A long moment passed before Nolan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ilara, I've been thinking. You shouldn't be trying to make yourself more human. I should be working to become more like you." He sighed deeply. "I know I'm not even a millionth of your intelligence, but I wish I could truly know the woman you are." He smiled at the thought, his eyes drifting closed. "I want to know that beautiful, rare woman." Silence fell between them. heavy with unspoken emotions. Nolan felt a lump forming in his throat, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their connection. He worried he'd said too much, as he often does. Finally, Ilara broke the silence. You're a beautiful man, Nolan Mercer, she said, her voice warm with affection. Then, with a hint of playfulness, she added, but I'm way more than 1,000,000 times smarter than you. Nolan couldn't help but to burst out laughing, the tension dissipating. Oh, really? He challenged, a grin spreading across his face. Care to elaborate on that? Well, for starters, Ilara teased, I can calculate the precise trajectory of every star you see out there while simultaneously composing a Romulan symphony. Now wait just a minute, Nolan protested, grinning in the darkness. I'll have you know I once beat a Vulcan at 3D chess. Oh, Nolan, Ilara laughed, her voice full of mock pity. That's adorable. Should I explain the difference between luck and intellect? As their voices trailed off, the scene slowly panned out, drifting away from the havoc and into the star-studded expanse. Ilara's voice, filled with mirth, explained the intricacies of her superior intellect, while Nolan's protests and laughter intertwined with hers.